I never imagined my own flesh and blood could end up here. The city was cold that night, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you question every decision you've ever made. I was driving home from a late shift, headlights cutting through the darkness, when I saw a figure huddled beneath a flickering street lamp. At first, I thought it was just another stranger lost to the night, but something about the way she held herself, protective, desperate, made me slow down. That's when I saw the child, bundled in a threadbare blanket, clinging to her side. My heart stopped. It couldn't be. But as I stepped out of the car, the truth hit me like a punch to the gut. It was my daughter, my own daughter, the little girl I'd once rocked to sleep, now sitting on a curb with her child, eyes hollow and cheeks streaked with tears. I called her name, my voice trembling. She looked up, and in that moment I saw a lifetime of pain etched into her face. I thought finding her like this was the worst thing that could happen, but the real shock was yet to come. Before that night, our lives looked ordinary from the outside. We lived in a modest house on a quiet street, the kind of place where neighbors waved from their porches and children rode bikes until the streetlights flickered on. My daughter, Emily, was always the bright spot in our home. She had a laugh that could fill a room and a stubborn streak that reminded me of myself at her age. She was a devoted mother to little Lily, who was just learning to tie her shoes and loved to draw pictures of our family with big, smiling faces. Our days followed a familiar rhythm. I woke early for work, making coffee and packing lunches while the house was still quiet. Emily would shuffle into the kitchen, hair tousled, Lily trailing behind her, clutching a stuffed rabbit. We'd share breakfast, sometimes in comfortable silence, sometimes with Emily venting about the latest frustration at her job or Lily's refusal to eat anything green. After breakfast, Emily would drop Lily at preschool and head to her shift at the grocery store. I'd go to my office job, returning in the evenings to the smell of dinner and the sound of cartoons drifting from the living room. On weekends, we'd gather around the table for pancakes or take Lily to the park. Emily and I would talk about her dreams, going back to school, finding a better job, maybe moving to a bigger place someday. She was determined, but there was always a shadow behind her eyes, a tension she tried to hide. Sometimes I'd catch her staring out the window, lost in thought, and when I asked what was wrong, she'd just shake her head and say she was tired, that work was getting to her, that Lily had been fussy. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. Bills started arriving more frequently, envelopes marked urgent or final notice. I'd find them tucked away in drawers or buried under piles of laundry. When I offered to help, Emily would bristle, insisting she had it under control. She'd get defensive, her voice tight, and I'd back off, not wanting to push her away. I told myself she was proud, that she just needed time to figure things out. I trusted that she would. Lily was the glue that held us together. Her laughter filled the house, her drawings covered the fridge, her questions about the world kept us both on our toes. Emily doted on her, reading bedtime stories and braiding her hair, making sure she never felt the absence of her father. I tried to be the steady presence, the one they could both rely on. We had our routines, our rituals, Sunday dinners, movie nights, birthday parties with homemade cakes. I thought these things were enough to keep us safe, to keep us close. I thought I knew everything that mattered about my daughter's life. I thought I could see trouble coming before it arrived. But the truth is, I missed the signs. I missed the way Emily's smile grew tighter, the way her laughter faded. I missed the fear in her eyes when the phone rang, the way she started locking her bedroom door at night. I missed the desperation in her voice when she asked if I could watch Lily for a few extra hours, just this once. Our world before was not perfect, but it was ours. It was built on love and routine, on the belief that we could face anything as long as we faced it together. I didn't know then how fragile that world was, how quickly it could unravel. I didn't know how much pain Emily was hiding, or how close she was to falling. I didn't know that everything I thought I understood about our family was about to be shattered. Emily's appearance changed too. She stopped wearing makeup, Her hair was often pulled back in a messy bun, and her clothes looked worn and faded. She lost weight, her cheeks growing hollow, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. When I commented, she'd laugh it off, saying she was too busy to care about looks. But I saw the way she avoided mirrors, the way she flinched at compliments. Lily, always so cheerful, started having nightmares. She'd wake up crying, calling for her mother, and Emily would rush to comfort her, holding her close until she calmed down. I asked if something had happened at preschool, but Emily assured me it was just a phase. Still, I noticed Lily clinging to her mother more, her drawings growing darker, filled with storm clouds and sad faces. There were other signs, too. Emily started skipping meals, claiming she wasn't hungry. She'd forget appointments, lose track of time, and sometimes disappear for hours without explanation. When I pressed her, she'd snap, accusing me of not trusting her, of treating her like a child. Our arguments grew more frequent, our silences longer. She stopped inviting friends over, stopped answering calls from people she used to see every week. Her world shrank until it was just work, Lily, and the four walls of our house. I tried to reach her, to pull her back, but she slipped further away with every passing day. The biggest red flag came the night she asked to borrow money. It was late, and she looked desperate, her hands shaking as she explained that her paycheck was short, that she just needed a little help to get by. I gave her what I could, but when I asked what had happened, she grew angry, accusing me of judging her. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her, and didn't come home until morning. I told myself it was just stress, that things would get better. I believed that if I loved her enough, if I gave her space, she'd find her way back. But the truth is, I was afraid of what I might discover if I pushed too hard, afraid of losing her if I didn't. So I ignored the signs, convinced myself that everything was fine, that Emily was strong enough to handle whatever life threw at her. Now, standing on that cold street, watching my daughter cradle her child in the shadows, I see every warning sign for what it was, a cry for help I never truly heard. The guilt is suffocating, the regret overwhelming. I wonder how different things might have been if I'd paid closer attention, if I'd asked the hard questions, if I'd refused to look away. But it's too late for what-ifs. All I can do now is face the truth I missed and try to make things right before it's too late. It happened so quickly, I almost didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. One day, Emily was there, quiet, withdrawn, but present. The next, she was gone. It started with unanswered texts. I'd send her a message in the morning asking if she needed anything, and hours would pass with no reply. I'd call her during my lunch break, only to hear her voicemail, her voice cheerful and bright, a stark contrast to the silence that followed. At first, I told myself she was busy, that she'd get back to me when she had a moment. But as the hours turned into days, my worry grew into something darker. Lily's preschool called asking why Emily hadn't dropped her off. I lied, saying Lily was sick, but my hands shook as I hung up the phone. I tried calling Emily again, this time leaving a message, my voice trembling as I begged her to call me back. I checked her room, hoping for a note, a clue, anything to explain her absence. The bed was made, the closet half empty, a few of Lily's toys missing from their usual place. It was as if they'd vanished into thin air. I called her friends, but none of them had seen her. Some hadn't heard from her in weeks. I drove to her work, hoping she'd picked up an extra shift, but her manager said she hadn't shown up in days. Her car was gone from the parking lot, and no one knew where she'd gone. Panic set in, a cold, relentless fear that gnawed at my insides. I called the hospitals, the shelters, even the police, but there was no record of Emily or Lily. Each call ended with the same hollow reassurance, "We'll let you know if we hear anything." Nights became endless. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every argument, every moment I might have missed a sign. I wondered if she'd left because of something I said or something I failed to say. I wondered if she was angry or scared or simply lost. The house felt emptier with every passing day, the silence broken only by the occasional ring of the phone, a telemarketer, a wrong number, never Emily. I started searching the city,
driving through neighborhoods I'd never visited, scanning faces at bus stops and in parks. I checked shelters, showing her photo to volunteers and staff, my heart sinking each time they shook their heads. I walked the streets at night, peering into alleyways and under bridges, desperate for any sign of my daughter and granddaughter. I left flyers at coffee shops, libraries, anywhere someone might see her. Each day I returned home exhausted, hope slipping further away. Family and friends tried to help, but their words felt empty. "They'll come back," they said. "She just needs time." But I knew something was wrong. Emily would never leave Lily behind, never disappear without a word. The not knowing was the worst part. The endless questions, the fear that something terrible had happened, the guilt that maybe I'd pushed her too hard or not enough. I tried to keep my routine, going to work, paying bills, pretending everything was normal, but every moment was colored by anxiety, every task a reminder of what was missing. I kept Lily's room just as she'd left it, her drawings still taped to the walls, her favorite stuffed animals lined up on the bed. I couldn't bring myself to move anything, as if keeping her space untouched might somehow bring her back. The days blurred together, each one heavier than the last. I stopped answering calls from friends, unable to bear their pity or their advice. I withdrew into myself, haunted by memories and regrets. I replayed our last conversation over and over, searching for a clue, a reason, anything that might explain why she'd left. Weeks passed, the world moved on, but I was stuck, trapped in a cycle of hope and despair. Every time the phone rang, my heart leapt, only to crash when it wasn't her. I started to lose faith, to believe that maybe I'd never see Emily or Lily again. The city felt colder, the nights longer, the silence more suffocating. Then, just as I was beginning to accept the possibility that they were truly gone, I saw her, huddled beneath that street lamp, clutching her child, eyes hollow and lost. In that moment, all the fear, all the pain, all the questions came rushing back. I realized that the disappearance was only the beginning. The real story, the real betrayal, was still waiting to be uncovered. The morning after I realized Emily and Lily were truly gone, I woke with a sense of dread so heavy it felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone, willing it to ring, hoping for a message, a sign, anything. But the silence was absolute. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I had to do something. I had to find them.
I started with the obvious places. I drove to Emily's old apartment, even though she hadn't lived there in months. The landlord let me in, shaking his head with sympathy, but the place was empty, stripped of any sign of her life. I left my number just in case. Next, I visited the grocery store where she worked. Her manager told me she hadn't picked up her last paycheck. Her coworkers looked at me with pity, offering little more than rumors and worried glances. I left a flyer with her photo on the break room bulletin board, my hands trembling as I pinned it up. I called every friend I could think of, even the ones Emily hadn't spoken to in years. Most hadn't seen her, but a few mentioned she'd seemed distant lately, distracted, always in a hurry. One friend said she'd asked about shelters. Another said she'd borrowed money and never paid it back. Each conversation left me more anxious, more convinced that something was terribly wrong. I went to the police station, clutching a folder of photos and documents. The officer at the desk listened patiently as I explained the situation, but his questions felt clinical, detached. Has she left before? Any history of mental illness? Was there an argument? I answered as best I could, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. He took my report, promised to keep an eye out, but I could tell Emily's case was just one of many. I left feeling more alone than ever. The days blurred together as I searched. I drove through neighborhoods I'd never visited, stopping at shelters, soup kitchens, and churches. I showed Emily's photo to anyone who would look, my voice growing hoarse from repeating the same desperate plea. Some people were kind, offering to keep an eye out or take a flyer. Others barely glanced at the picture before turning away. I learned quickly that the world is full of people who are lost, and not all of them want to be found.
Emotionally, the search was exhausting. Every time I thought I saw someone who looked like Emily, my heart would leap, only to crash when it wasn't her. I started to doubt myself, to wonder if I was doing more harm than good. Was I invading her privacy? Was I making things worse? But the thought of Lily, innocent, vulnerable, caught in the middle, kept me going. I couldn't give up. I wouldn't. Logistically, the search was a nightmare. I missed work, burned through vacation days, and spent hours on the phone with social services, hospitals, and anyone who might have information. I kept a notebook filled with names, addresses, and dead ends. I barely slept, haunted my dreams of Emily calling out for help just out of reach. I tried to keep my hope alive, but it grew harder with each passing day. I replayed every conversation, every argument, searching for a clue I might have missed. I wondered if she was angry with me, if she blamed me for her struggles. I wondered if she was hiding on purpose, or if something had happened that she couldn't control. There were moments when I wanted to give up, to accept that Emily didn't want to be found. But then I'd see Lily's face in my mind, remember her laughter, her tiny hand in mine, and I'd find the strength to keep going. I told myself that as long as I was searching, there was still hope. The search changed me. It stripped away my illusions, forced me to confront the reality of Emily's life and my own failures as a parent. I realized how little I truly knew about her struggles, how much pain she must have been carrying. I promised myself that if I found her, I would listen, really listen, and do whatever it took to help her heal. Every day, I left the house with a new sense of determination, fueled by love, guilt, and desperation. I didn't know where the search would lead or what I would find at the end, but I knew I couldn't stop, not until I brought my daughter and granddaughter home, or at least knew the truth. The search had begun, and there was no turning back. It was a Thursday evening, the sky bruised with the last light of day, when I finally found them. I'd been driving for hours, circling the city's forgotten corners, my mind numb with exhaustion and dread. I almost missed them, just two figures, huddled together on a bench near the bus station, half hidden by a battered suitcase and a pile of blankets. But something about the way the smaller figure clung to the larger one made me slow down, my heart pounding in my chest. I parked the car and stepped out, the cold air biting at my skin. My hands shook as I approached, each step heavy with fear and hope. As I drew closer, the woman looked up, her face pale and gaunt, eyes wide with shock. For a moment, I didn't recognize her. The Emily I knew was always put together, always smiling for Lily's sake. But this woman was a stranger. Her hair tangled, her cheeks hollow, her clothes hanging off her frame. Then I saw the child beside her, and my breath caught in my throat. Lily. She was curled against her mother, her small face streaked with dirt, her eyes too old for her years. She clutched a faded stuffed rabbit, the same one she'd carried everywhere since she was a baby. When she saw me, she blinked, as if trying to remember who I was. My knees nearly buckled. I knelt before them, tears stinging my eyes.
Emily? My voice was barely a whisper. She stared at me, disbelief and shame warring on her face. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The world seemed to shrink to that patch of concrete, the three of us suspended in a silence thick with everything we'd lost. Finally, Emily looked away, her shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice raw. "I didn't know where else to go." I reached out, my hand trembling, and touched her arm. She flinched, then relaxed, as if the simple contact reminded her she wasn't alone. Lily looked up at me, her eyes searching my face. "Grandma?" she said, her voice small and uncertain. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. I gathered her into my arms, feeling how thin she'd become, how cold her skin was. She clung to me, her body trembling. I looked at Emily, searching for answers. "Why didn't you call? Why didn't you come home?" She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I was scared. I thought I could fix it. I didn't want you to see me like this." Her words broke something inside me. I wanted to be angry, to demand explanations, but all I felt was heartbreak.
We sat there for a long time, the city moving around us, people passing by without a second glance. I tried to shield them from the wind, wrapping my coat around Lily's shoulders. Emily kept apologizing, her voice growing fainter with each word. I told her it didn't matter, that we'd figure it out, that I loved her no matter what. But inside, I was reeling, confused, devastated, and overwhelmed by guilt. I helped them to the car, my mind racing with questions I was too afraid to ask. As I drove us home, Emily stared out the window, silent tears tracing lines down her face. Lily fell asleep in the back seat, her head resting on my coat. I glanced at them in the rearview mirror, my heart breaking all over again. That night, as I tucked Lily into bed and watched Emily curl up on the couch, I realized nothing would ever be the same. The pain in Emily's eyes, the fear in Lily's voice, the weight of everything unsaid, it all pressed down on me, suffocating and inescapable. I wanted to believe that bringing them home was enough, that love could fix what was broken. But deep down, I knew the real shock was still waiting, hidden beneath the surface, ready to shatter what little peace we had left. The drive home was silent, the kind of silence that aches. Emily stared out the window, her face turned away from me, while Lily slept in the back seat, her small hand still clutching that worn rabbit. I kept glancing at them in the mirror, searching for some sign that this was all a bad dream, that I'd wake up and find everything as it used to be. But the exhaustion in Emily's posture and the shadows under Lily's eyes told me this was real. When we reached the house, I unlocked the door and ushered them inside. The warmth of home felt almost foreign after the chill of the street. Emily hesitated in the entryway, as if she wasn't sure she belonged anymore. I tried to make things normal, offering her a cup of tea, asking if she wanted to shower or eat. She shook her head, mumbling a quiet, "Thank you," her eyes fixed on the floor. Lily wandered into the living room, looking around as if she was trying to remember the place. I found her a blanket and tucked her onto the couch, brushing the hair from her forehead. She smiled weakly, her eyelids drooping. Within minutes, she was asleep again, her breathing soft and even. I turned my attention to Emily, who stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Where had she been? What had happened? Why hadn't she called? But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I sat beside her, close but not touching, and waited. The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything we weren't saying. Finally, I tried to break the ice. "You're safe now. You don't have to explain anything tonight. Just rest." She nodded, but her jaw was clenched, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I could see the wall she'd built around herself, thick and high, and I knew it wouldn't come down easily. I set out clean towels and pajamas, left a plate of food on the table, and dimmed the lights. Emily moved through the house like a ghost, barely touching anything, her presence tentative and fragile. She didn't eat, didn't shower, just curled up in the armchair and stared at the darkness outside. I sat in the kitchen listening to the quiet, my mind racing. I wanted to reach her, to pull her back from whatever edge she was standing on, but I didn't know how. Every attempted conversation was met with a monosyllabic answer or averted eyes. I told her I loved her, that I was here for her, but she only nodded, her face unreadable. That night, I barely slept. I checked on Lily, watched Emily from the hallway, afraid that if I looked away, they might disappear again. The house felt different, as if it was holding its breath, waiting for something to break the tension. I lay awake, replaying every moment, every missed sign, every word left unsaid. In the early hours, I heard Emily crying softly in the living room. I wanted to go to her, to hold her like I did when she was a child, but I stayed where I was, giving her the space she seemed to need. I realized then that bringing them home was only the first step. Healing would take time, patience, and a willingness to face the pain we'd both tried so hard to ignore. For now, all I could do was offer shelter for the night, and hope that in time, Emily would let me in. Lily woke up in a room that smelled of cinnamon and clean sheets. She blinked in the soft morning light, unsure for a moment where she was. The couch beneath her was big and soft, not like the hard benches or cold ground she'd grown used to. She sat up, clutching her rabbit, and looked around. The walls were covered in pictures, Some of her, some of her mom, some of Grandma. She remembered this place, but it felt like a memory from a long time ago, like a dream she'd almost forgotten. She slid off the couch and padded into the kitchen, her bare feet making no sound. Grandma was there, humming quietly as she poured coffee. When she saw Lily, her face lit up with a smile that made Lily feel warm inside. "Good morning, sweetheart," Grandma said, kneeling down to hug her. Lily hugged back, holding on a little longer than usual. "Are we staying here now?" Lily asked, her voice small and uncertain. Grandma nodded, brushing Lily's hair from her face. "You're safe here, honey. You can stay as long as you need." Lily nodded, but her mind was full of questions she didn't know how to ask. She wandered through the house, touching familiar things, a stack of books, a soft blanket, a row of shoes by the door. Everything seemed bigger than she remembered. She found her mother sitting by the window, staring outside. Emily looked tired, her eyes red and puffy. Lily climbed into her lap, curling up against her. Emily wrapped her arms around her, holding her close.
"Are you okay, Mommy?" Lily whispered. Emily kissed the top of her head. "I'm just tired, baby, but I'm glad we're here." Lily nodded, not sure what else to say. She wanted to ask why they'd left, why they'd slept outside, why Mommy cried at night, but she was afraid of the answers. Later, Grandma made pancakes, and Lily ate 3, her stomach rumbling with hunger. She listened to the grown-ups talk in low voices, words she didn't understand: money, work, help, home. She watched their faces, trying to read their moods. Sometimes Grandma looked sad, sometimes worried, but she always smiled when she looked at Lily. Lily spent the afternoon drawing pictures at the kitchen table. She drew a house with a big sun and 3 people holding hands. She drew her rabbit, too, and a heart above their heads. She wanted to show her mom, to make her smile, but Emily was sleeping on the couch, her face turned to the wall. That night, Lily lay in bed, the sheets soft and warm. She listened to the quiet sounds of the house: Grandma washing dishes, the hum of the heater, the distant sound of cars outside. She missed her old bed, her toys, the way things used to be. She missed the days when her mom laughed more and cried less. Before she fell asleep, Lily whispered to her rabbit, "I hope we can stay here. I hope Mommy gets better." She closed her eyes, holding her rabbit tight, and dreamed of a world where everything was safe and simple again. In her dreams, her family was whole, and the shadows that followed them were finally gone. It was late in the evening, the house quiet, except for the ticking of the old clock in the hallway. Emily sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of untouched tea. I sat across from her, waiting, sensing that something heavy was pressing on her chest. She'd been distant all day, barely speaking, her eyes darting away whenever I tried to meet them. I knew she was carrying a secret, something that had been eating at her long before she ended up on the street. Finally, she broke the silence. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I need to tell you something, Mom." I nodded, my heart pounding. She stared into her mug, gathering the courage to continue. "It's about why I left, why I couldn't come home, why I didn't call." I reached across the table, covering her hand with mine. She flinched at first, then let her fingers rest beneath my palm. "You can tell me anything," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She took a shaky breath. It was Mark. The name hit me like a slab. Mark had been Emily's closest friend since childhood, almost like a brother to her. He'd been around for every birthday, every holiday, always quick with a joke or a helping hand. I trusted him. We all had. Emily's eyes filled with tears. After Lily's father left, Mark started coming around more. At first, I thought he was just trying to help. He'd bring groceries, fix things around the house, watch Lily when I had to work late. I was grateful. I thought he was just being a good friend. She paused, her voice trembling. But then things changed. He started making comments about how I looked, about how lonely I must be. He'd touch my arm, my back, linger a little too long. I tried to laugh it off, but it made me uncomfortable. I told him to stop, but he just smiled and said I was imagining things. I felt a cold anger rising in my chest. "Did he hurt you?" I asked, my voice tight. Emily shook her head, wiping her eyes. "Not at first, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. He started showing up unannounced, letting himself in with the spare key. One night, after Lily was asleep, he cornered me in the kitchen.
He said I owed him for everything he'd done, that I should be grateful someone still wanted me. I told him to leave, but he wouldn't. He got angry, started yelling. I was scared, Mom. I didn't know what to do. She looked up at me, her face etched with shame. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. They took a report, but nothing happened. Mark started spreading rumors about me, at work, with my friends. He said I was unstable, that I was using people, that I was a bad mother. People started looking at me differently. I lost hours at work. Friends stopped calling. I felt like I was drowning. I squeezed her hand, my own eyes burning with tears. Why didn't you tell me? She shook her head, her voice breaking. I was embarrassed. I thought maybe it was my fault, that I'd led him on without realizing. I didn't want you to think less of me. And then, when the bills piled up and I couldn't pay rent, I was too ashamed to ask for help. I thought I could fix it on my own, but everything just kept getting worse. The truth settled between us, heavy and raw. I realized how blind I'd been, how much I'd missed while trying to keep our lives together. I wanted to find Mark, to scream at him, to make him pay for what he'd done. But more than anything, I wanted to hold my daughter and tell her none of this was her fault. I stood and walked around the table, pulling Emily into my arms. She sobbed against my shoulder, years of pain and fear pouring out in waves. I stroked her hair, whispering that I loved her, that I was proud of her for surviving, that she was safe now. As her tears subsided, I promised her that we would get through this together, that no matter how deep the betrayal, no matter how broken things seemed, she would never have to face it alone again. In that moment, I understood the true cost of silence, the damage that secrets and shame can do, and I vowed to never let her carry that burden by herself again. It started with small things, the kind of setbacks that most people brush off and promise themselves they'll fix tomorrow. Emily was always good at making do, at stretching a dollar, at finding a way to keep going even when the odds were stacked against her. But after Mark's betrayal, the world seemed to close in around her, every door she tried to open slamming shut before she could step through. Emily lost hours at work first. Her manager, once friendly, started giving her fewer shifts, citing budget cuts and new hires. Emily knew the truth. Mark's rumors had spread, poisoning the well. Coworkers whispered behind her back. Friends stopped calling. She tried to confront her manager, to explain, but the conversation ended with a polite smile and a suggestion that maybe she should look for something else. Bills piled up. The rent was due, the utilities overdue, and Lily needed new shoes for preschool. Emily sold what she could, her old laptop, a few pieces of jewelry, even the television. She skipped meals so Lily could eat, told herself it was just a rough patch, that things would turn around. But every day brought a new notice, a new demand, a new reminder that she was falling further behind. The landlord was patient at first, but patience has limits. He knocked on the door one evening, his voice gentle but firm. "Emily, I can't keep holding off. I have bills too. If you can't pay by the end of the month, I'll have to ask you to leave." She nodded, promising she'd find a way, but inside, she felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. She reached out to friends, but most had already drifted away. The few who answered her calls offered sympathy, but little else. Some believed Mark's stories. Others were simply too busy with their own lives. Emily felt invisible, her world shrinking to the walls of her apartment and the small, worried face of her daughter.
Desperation led her to Mark one last time. She called him, voice shaking, and asked if he could lend her some money, just enough to get by until her next paycheck. He agreed to meet, but when she arrived, he made it clear that his help came with strings attached. He wanted her gratitude, her company, her silence. Emily left in tears, realizing she was truly alone. The eviction notice came on a Friday. She packed what she could into 2 suitcases, bundled Lily into her arms, and left the apartment that had once been their home. She tried to make it an adventure for Lily, telling her they were going on a trip, that they'd stay with friends for a while. But the truth was, there was nowhere to go. They spent the first night in a cheap motel, the kind with flickering lights and thin walls. Emily lay awake, listening to the sounds of strangers in the next room, her mind racing with fear and regret. The next day, she called every shelter in the city, but there were waiting lists, rules, and not enough beds. She tried to stay positive for Lily, but each rejection chipped away at her hope. Days blurred together.
They slept in the car sometimes, parked in quiet neighborhoods where no one would notice. Emily rationed what little money she had left, buying food from gas stations and dollar stores. She washed Lily's clothes in public restrooms, did her best to keep her clean and fed. She told stories at night, trying to make Lily laugh, but her own laughter sounded hollow. The weather turned cold. Emily wrapped Lily in every piece of clothing they owned, holding her close to keep her warm. She watched other families walk by, their lives untouched by the kind of fear that had become her constant companion. She wondered if anyone could see her, if anyone cared. One night, after a particularly long day of searching for help, Emily sat on a bench in the park, Lily asleep in her lap. She stared at the sky, tears streaming down her face, and wondered how it had come to this. She thought about calling me, about swallowing her pride and asking for help, but shame held her back. She didn't want me to see her like this, didn't want Lily to know how far they'd fallen. She tried to find work, but without an address, without references, every door was closed. She stood in line at food banks, grateful for every meal, but humiliated by the looks of pity from volunteers. She learned to move quietly, to avoid drawing attention, to keep Lily close at all times. The final blow came when the car broke down. It sputtered and died on the side of the road, refusing to start no matter how many times she turned the key. With no money for repairs, no way to get around, Emily and Lily were truly stranded. They walked the city streets, searching for a safe place to sleep, for a moment of kindness, for a way out. Through it all, Emily tried to shield Lily from the worst of it. She made up games, sang songs, told her that everything would be okay. But at night, when Lily was asleep, Emily let herself cry, the weight of her failure crushing her. She wondered if she'd ever find her way back, if she'd ever feel safe again. That was the spiral, the slow, relentless slide from hope to despair, from home to homelessness. It wasn't one big mistake, but 1,000 small ones, a series of doors closing until there was nowhere left to turn. And in the end, it was shame and fear that kept her from reaching out, that kept her from coming home. Until there was no other choice. I had spent days wrestling with the truth, the anger inside me growing hotter with every detail Emily revealed. Mark's betrayal was a wound that wouldn't close, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't let it go unaddressed. I owed it to Emily, to Lily, and to myself. I needed to look Mark in the eye and demand answers. I needed him to know the damage he'd done. I found him on a Saturday afternoon, working in his garage, the radio blaring and the smell of motor oil thick in the air. For a moment, I watched him from the driveway, remembering all the times he'd been in our home, laughing with Emily, bouncing Lily on his knee, sharing meals at our table. The memory made my stomach turn. He looked up as I approached, wiping his hands on a rag. "Hey there, long time no see." His smile was easy, practiced, as if nothing had changed. I felt my hands clench into fists. "We need to talk," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. He shrugged, gesturing for me to come inside. "Sure, what's up?" I stepped into the garage, the door closing behind me with a heavy thud. The air felt charged, thick with everything unsaid. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "It's about Emily." His expression flickered, just for a second, before settling back into that same casual mask. "Is she okay? I haven't seen her in a while." I stared at him, searching for any sign of remorse. "She's not okay, Mark. She's been through hell, and you know exactly why." He looked away, busying himself with a wrench on the workbench. "I don't know what you're talking about." My anger boiled over. "Don't lie to me. I know what you did. I know about the rumors, the threats, the way you made her feel unsafe in her own home. I know you used her trust against her. She trusted you, Mark. We all did." He slammed the wrench down, the sound echoing through the garage. "You don't know the whole story." "Then tell me," I demanded, my voice trembling. "Tell me why you thought it was okay to destroy her life. Why you thought you could take advantage of her when she was at her lowest." He glared at me, his jaw tight. She used me. She took everything I gave and never gave anything back. I was there for her when everyone else left. I thought—" He stopped, shaking his head. "I thought she cared about me." "She did care," I shot back, "but not the way you wanted. That didn't give you the right to hurt her, to spread lies, to make her feel like she was nothing." He looked away, his face flushed with anger and shame. "I just wanted her to see me, to appreciate me." I felt a wave of disgust. "You wanted her to be grateful for your friendship, so you tried to buy her affection, and when she didn't give you what you wanted, you punished her. You ruined her reputation, cost her her job, her friends, her home. You did that, Mark, you." He opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off. "You need to understand what you've done. Emily and Lily were living on the street. They had nothing because of you, because you couldn't handle being told no." For a moment he looked genuinely shaken. His eyes darted around the garage as if searching for an escape. "I never meant it to go that far," he muttered. I was angry. I said things I shouldn't have, but she could have come to you. She could have asked for help." "She was ashamed," I said, my voice breaking. "She thought it was her fault. She thought she'd let him on, that she deserved what happened. You made her feel that way. You made her feel alone." He slumped against the workbench, the weight of his fight draining out of him. "I'm sorry," he whispered, but the words felt empty. "Sorry isn't enough," I said. "You need to make this right. You need to tell the truth to everyone. You need to clear her name, admit what you did. If you have any decency left, you'll do it." He nodded, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I will, I promise. I'll talk to her boss, her friends. I'll tell them the truth." I stared at him, searching for sincerity. "If you don't, I will, and I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you did." He nodded again, defeated. "I understand." I turned to leave, my heart pounding. As I reached the door, he called after me, "Tell Emily I'm sorry for everything." I didn't answer. I walked out into the sunlight, the weight of the confrontation settling over me. I didn't know if Mark would keep his word, if he'd really try to undo the damage he'd caused, but I knew I'd done what I could. I'd stood up for my daughter, for my family. I'd faced the person who hurt us and demanded justice.
When I got home, Emily was waiting. She looked at me, searching my face for answers. I told her what had happened, what Mark had promised. She listened in silence, tears streaming down her cheeks. When I finished, she hugged me, holding on tight. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing me, for fighting for me." I held her close, vowing that I would never let anyone hurt her again. The confrontation hadn't erased the pain, but it was a start, a step toward healing, toward reclaiming the life that had been stolen from us. And as the sun set outside, I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back. The days after confronting Mark were anything but peaceful. Word spread quickly, as it always does in families in small towns. Mark's confession rippled through our circle of friends and relatives, but instead of bringing closure, it tore open old wounds and exposed fractures I hadn't realized were still there. At first, I thought the truth would unite us. I imagined everyone rallying around Emily, offering support and apologies for not seeing what she'd endured. But reality was messier. Some family members believed her immediately, their outrage echoing my own. They called, sent messages, brought over meals, and promised to help however they could. Their kindness was a balm, but it couldn't drown out the voices of doubt that soon followed. Others hesitated, their loyalty to Mark clouding their judgment. "He's always been like a son to us," my sister said, her voice tight with confusion. "Are you sure there isn't more to the story?" An uncle called to say he'd heard different versions and that maybe Emily had misunderstood Mark's intentions. The implications stung. I felt my anger flare, but also a deep sadness. I realized how quickly trust could be shattered, how easily people could retreat into denial when faced with uncomfortable truths. Emily felt the weight of every whisper, every sideways glance. She tried to hold her head high, but I saw the way she shrank from conversations, the way she avoided family gatherings. Lily sensed the tension too, clinging to her mother, her eyes wide and uncertain. The house, once a place of comfort, now felt crowded with unspoken accusations and unresolved pain. Old arguments resurfaced, wounds I thought had healed long ago. My brother brought up the time Emily had borrowed money and struggled to pay it back, as if that somehow justified what had happened. My mother, always quick to mediate, tried to smooth things over, urging everyone to move on for the sake of the family. But moving on felt impossible when the air was thick with resentment and suspicion. I found myself caught in the middle, defending Emily at every turn, growing more exhausted with each conversation. I wanted to protect her, to shield her from the judgment of those who should have loved her unconditionally. But I couldn't control what people believed, couldn't force them to see the truth. The more I tried, the more isolated I felt. Emily withdrew further, her trust in the family, already fragile, now nearly broken. She stopped answering calls from relatives, stopped attending family dinners. She focused on Lily, pouring all her energy into creating a sense of normalcy for her daughter. But I saw the toll it took, the way her smile faded, the way her laughter grew rare. The fracture wasn't just between Emily and the rest of the family. It ran through all of us, exposing old grievances and hidden resentments. Siblings argued over who had done more to help, parents questioned their own choices, and friends picked sides. The sense of unity we'd once taken for granted was gone, replaced with suspicion and silence. I tried to hold us together, to remind everyone of what mattered, but it felt like shouting into the wind. The pain was too fresh, the wounds too deep. I realized that healing would take more than apologies and promises. It would take time, honesty, and a willingness to face the darkness we'd all tried to ignore. In the quiet moments, I wondered if things would ever be the same. I wondered if trust, once broken, could ever be rebuilt. I watched Emily and Lily, their bond unbreakable, and took comfort in the small moments of love that still survived. But I knew the family we'd been was gone, replaced by something more fragile, more complicated, and maybe, in time, more honest. It was a rainy afternoon that Emily finally told me the truth she'd been holding back, the secret that had weighed on her even more than Mark's betrayal. The house was quiet, Lily napping in her room, the steady patter of rain against the windows filling the silence. Emily sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she hadn't touched. I could sense her restlessness, the way she kept glancing at the clock, her foot tapping nervously against the floor. I sat across from her, waiting. I'd learned not to push, to let her come to me in her own time. Eventually, she looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and tired. "Mom, there's something else I need to tell you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, bracing myself. "Whatever it is, you can tell me." She took a shaky breath, her fingers trembling as she set the mug down. "It's about the money, the bills, the rent, everything that happened before we lost the apartment." She paused, swallowing hard. "I wasn't just behind because of work. I was being blackmailed." The word hung in the air, heavy and foreign. I stared at her, trying to process what she'd said. Blackmailed? By who? Emily's eyes filled with tears. By someone from work. After Mark started those rumors, I was desperate to keep my job. There was a supervisor, Mr. Harris. He said he could make the rumors go away, get me more hours, help me keep my apartment, but he wanted something in return. He started asking for money, small amounts at first, then more. He said if I didn't pay him, he'd tell everyone I was stealing, that I was unstable, that I was a danger to Lily. I felt a surge of anger and disbelief. "Did you give him money?" She nodded, shame coloring her cheeks. "Yes, everything I had. I sold things, borrowed from friends, even pawned my grandmother's ring. I thought if I just paid him it would stop, but it never did. He kept coming back, threatening me, making me feel like I had no way out. I was so scared, Mom. I thought if I told anyone, they'd take Lily away from me. I thought they'd take her away." Tears streamed down her face as she spoke, her voice breaking with every word.
I know I should have told you. I know I should have gone to the police, but I was so ashamed. I felt like I'd failed as a mother, as a daughter. I thought if I just kept going, if I just kept paying, I could fix it. But I couldn't. I lost everything anyway. I reached across the table, taking her hands in mine. Emily, none of this is your fault. You were scared and alone, and people took advantage of that. But you're not alone anymore. We'll go to the police together. We'll make sure he can't hurt you or anyone else again. She nodded, relief and fear mingling in her eyes. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry for not telling you sooner. I squeezed her hands, my own eyes filling with tears. You don't have to be sorry. You did what you thought you had to do to protect Lily. That's what matters. As the rain continued to fall outside, I realized how much pain Emily had carried in silence, how much she'd sacrificed to try to keep her daughter safe. The secret she'd hidden out of shame and fear changed everything I thought I knew about her struggle. It wasn't just bad luck or poor choices. It was the result of cruelty, manipulation, and a system that failed to protect her. In that moment, I made a promise to Emily and to myself. We would face whatever came next together. No more secrets, no more shame. Just the truth and the hope that with time, we could find our way back to each other. The days after Emily's confession were a blur of emotion and uncertainty. I found myself caught between the urge to protect her at all costs and the fear that by doing so, I might only be enabling the cycle that had brought us here. I wanted to fix everything, to make the pain disappear, but I knew deep down that love alone couldn't heal wounds this deep. I had to decide what kind of help would truly serve her and what would only keep us trapped in the past. I spent sleepless nights replaying every conversation, every choice I'd made as a mother. Had I been too controlling, too quick to offer solutions instead of listening? Or had I failed to step in when she needed me most? The guilt was suffocating, but I knew I couldn't let it guide my next steps. Emily needed more than comfort. She needed a path forward, one that would help her reclaim her life and her dignity. One morning, as the sun rose pale and uncertain through the kitchen window, I sat across from Emily at the table. She looked fragile, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. I realized then that she was waiting for me to decide, to set the tone for what came next. I saw the hope and fear mingled in her gaze, the silent plea for help, but also the dread of being smothered or judged. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. Emily, I love you. I always will. But I can't make your choices for you. I can't fix everything, no matter how much I want to. What I can do is stand by you, support you, and help you find the resources you need. But you have to be the one to take the next step. She nodded, her shoulders trembling. I'm scared, Mom. I don't know if I can do it on my own. You're not on your own, I said gently. But you have to want things to change. You have to be willing to ask for help, to accept it, and to do the hard work of healing. I'll be here every step of the way, but I can't carry you. Not anymore. The words hurt to say, but I knew they were true. I had to set boundaries, not out of anger or disappointment, but out of love. I couldn't let my fear of losing her dictate my actions. I had to trust that she was strong enough to find her way, even if the path was difficult. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of my words settling between us. Finally, Emily nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I want to try, Mom. I want to get better, for Lily, for myself, but I need your help. I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. "You have it. We'll find a counselor, talk to the police, and get you the support you need. But you have to promise me something too. No more secrets, no more hiding. We face everything together, no matter how hard it gets." She squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "I promise." In that moment, I felt a shift, a turning point. The old patterns of rescue and silence were broken. We were choosing something new: honesty, accountability, and hope. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks and pain. But for the first time in a long while, I believed we could make it through. Not as the family we once were, but as the family we were becoming. One built on truth, trust, and the courage to begin again. Healing didn't happen all at once. It came in small, sometimes painful steps, each one a test of our willingness to face the truth and move forward together. The first step was finding a counselor for Emily, a gentlewoman named Dr. Patel, who specialized in trauma and family recovery. Emily was nervous at first, her voice barely above a whisper during those early sessions. But over time, she began to open up. She spoke about the shame she'd carried, the fear that kept her silent, and the anger that simmered beneath her sadness. Dr. Patel listened without judgment, guiding her through the tangled web of pain and betrayal. I started attending sessions too, sometimes with Emily, sometimes on my own. I learned how to listen without trying to fix, how to offer support without taking over. I realized how much of my love had been tangled up in worry and control, and how important it was to let Emily find her own strength. We talked about boundaries, what they meant, why they mattered, and how they could help us both heal. At home, we made a conscious effort to rebuild trust. We set aside time each week for honest conversations, no matter how uncomfortable. We talked about the past, about the choices we'd made, and the pain we'd caused each other. There were tears and apologies, moments when old wounds reopened, but there was also laughter, tentative at first, then freer as the days passed. Lily, sensing the change, grew more relaxed, her nightmares fading as the tension in the house eased. We created new routines, small rituals that helped us feel safe and connected. Sunday mornings became pancake breakfasts, with Lily helping to stir the batter and Emily reading stories at the table. We took walks in the park, breathing in the fresh air and letting the sunlight warm our faces. We celebrated small victories: Emily landing a part-time job, Lily making a new friend at school, and me learning to let go of the need to control every outcome. There were setbacks, of course. Some days the weight of the past felt too heavy, and old fears crept back in. Emily struggled with guilt and anxiety, sometimes withdrawing when things felt overwhelming. I had to remind myself not to push, to trust the process, to believe that healing was possible even when progress was slow. We reached out for help when we needed it. Emily joined a support group for survivors of abuse, finding comfort in the stories of others who had walked similar paths. I leaned on friends and family who had stood by us, grateful for their patience and understanding. Together, we learned that asking for help was not a sign of weakness, but of courage.
As the weeks turned into months, I watched Emily grow stronger. She smiled more easily, laughed more often, and began to dream about the future again. She talked about going back to school, about building a life for herself and Lily that was rooted in hope, not fear. I felt my own heart healing, the guilt and regret slowly giving way to pride and gratitude. Reconciliation wasn't a single moment, but a series of choices: to forgive, to trust, to keep showing up for each other even when it was hard. We learned that love was not about erasing the past, but about building something new in its place. We learned that healing was not a destination, but a journey we would walk together, one step at a time. In the end, it was the small things that mattered most: The quiet conversations, the shared meals, the simple act of holding each other close. We were not the same family we had been, but we were stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever before. And as I watched Emily and Lily play in the backyard, their laughter ringing out in the afternoon sun, I knew that we were finally on the road to healing. Sometimes, when the grown-ups thought I wasn't listening, I heard them talk about what happened. I didn't understand all the words, but I knew things had changed. I knew Mommy was sad a lot, and Grandma hugged her more than before. I knew we didn't live in our old place anymore, and that my bed was different, but it was soft and warm, and I liked the way Grandma tucked me in at night. I missed my old toys, the ones we left behind, and sometimes I missed the way things used to be. But I liked being here, too. Grandma made pancakes with smiley faces, and Mommy read me stories every night. Sometimes, when Mommy cried, I would hold her hand and tell her it was okay. She would smile at me, even if her eyes were shiny with tears. I drew pictures for them, pictures of us holding hands, of our house with a big sun and lots of flowers. I wanted them to know that I was happy, even if things were different. I wanted them to know that I loved them and that I wasn't scared anymore. One day, I asked Mommy if we were going to stay here forever. She hugged me tight and said, "We're safe now, Lily. We're home." I liked the way she said it, like she really believed it. I believed it too. Sometimes I heard Grandma and Mommy talking in the kitchen, their voices soft and serious. I would peek around the corner and they would smile at me and invite me to join them. I liked sitting at the table with them, drawing or just listening to their voices. It made me feel like everything was going to be okay. I didn't understand all the things that had happened, but I knew that we were together. I knew that Grandma and Mommy loved me and that I loved them. That was enough for me. When I went to sleep at night, I would whisper to my rabbit, "We're safe, we're home." And I would dream of sunshine, laughter, and a family that would never let go. Just as the air in our home began to feel lighter, as if the weight of the past was finally lifting, life reminded us that healing is never a straight line. It happened on a gray Thursday afternoon, the kind where the sky presses low and the world feels heavy. Emily came home from work, her face pale and drawn, clutching a letter in her trembling hands. She handed it to me without a word. It was from the landlord, a notice that the house we'd come to see as our sanctuary was being sold. We had 60 days to find somewhere new. Panic set in almost immediately. I saw it in Emily's eyes, the way her breath quickened, the way her hands shook as she tried to steady herself. Lily, sensing the tension, grew quiet, her drawings left unfinished on the kitchen table. The fear of losing our home, of being uprooted again, threatened to unravel all the progress we'd made. Old anxieties resurfaced, and for a moment I felt the ground shift beneath us. Emily's first instinct was to retreat, to shut down and withdraw into herself. She spent hours searching for apartments online, her frustration mounting with every no vacancies and every price tag that seemed impossibly high. I tried to reassure her, to remind her that we'd faced worse and survived, but my own voice sounded hollow. The memories of the street, of cold nights and empty bellies, hovered at the edges of our conversations. Tension crept back into the house. We snapped at each other over small things, dirty dishes, missed phone calls, the noise of Lily's cartoons. I caught myself falling into old patterns, trying to take control, to fix everything for Emily, but she pushed back, insisting she could handle it. The boundaries we'd worked so hard to build felt fragile, threatened by the fear that we might lose everything again. One night, after Lily had gone to bed, Emily and I sat at the kitchen table in silence. The letter lay between us, a stark reminder of our uncertainty. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if we can't find a place? What if we end up back where we started?" I reached for her hand, my own heart pounding. "We're not the same people we were then. We have each other. We have a plan. We'll get through this together." She looked at me, tears brimming in her eyes. "I'm scared, Mommy. I don't want Lily to go through that again. I don't want to fail her." "You won't.
We won't. We've come too far to let fear win now. The next day, instead of searching alone, we made a list of what we needed and what we could afford. We reached out to friends, to support groups, to anyone who might know of a place. I called a local housing agency, and Emily spoke to her counselor, who offered resources and encouragement. For the first time since the letter arrived, I saw hope flicker in Emily's eyes. Lily, too, became our anchor. She drew pictures of new houses, of gardens and sunny windows, and taped them to the fridge. Her quiet optimism reminded us of what mattered most, not the walls around us, but the love we shared inside them.
After weeks of searching, setbacks, and disappointments, we found a small apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't perfect, but it was safe, warm, and ours. Moving day was chaotic and exhausting, but as we unpacked boxes and arranged furniture, laughter returned to our home. We celebrated with pizza on the floor, Lily giggling as she declared the new place the best house ever. The crisis had tested us, threatened to undo all we'd rebuilt, but in facing it together, we discovered a new strength. We learned that home wasn't a place, but the people who filled it with love and hope. We learned that setbacks didn't have to break us. They could bring us closer if we let them. As I watched Emily and Lily settle into their new room, I felt a deep sense of pride. We had faced the final test, and we had come through, not unscathed, but unbroken. And as the sun sat outside our new window, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together as a family. The weeks after the move were a blur of adjustment and small victories. The new apartment was smaller, the walls thin enough to hear neighbors' footsteps, but it was ours. We filled it with the things that mattered. Lily's drawings taped to the fridge, Emily's favorite blanket draped over the couch, the scent of coffee and pancakes on Sunday mornings. There was no illusion of perfection, but there was a sense of peace, a quiet understanding that we had survived something that could have broken us. Emily started her new job at a local daycare, a place that welcomed Lily too. The hours were long, the pay modest, but she came home each day with a tired smile and stories about the children she cared for. I watched her confidence return, slow and steady, as she learned to trust herself again. She kept up with her counseling, sometimes inviting me to join her, sometimes going alone. We talked openly about boundaries, what we needed from each other, what we could and couldn't give. There were moments of tension, times when old habits threatened to resurface, but we faced them together with honesty and patience. Lily thrived in her new routine. She made friends at the daycare, brought home crafts and songs, and filled our evenings with laughter. She still asked questions about the past, about why things had changed, but she seemed to understand that home was not a place, but the people who loved her. Her resilience became our anchor, a reminder that hope could grow even in the hardest soil. We set new rituals to mark our new beginning. Friday nights became movie nights, with popcorn and blankets piled on the floor. On Saturdays, we explored the neighborhood, discovering parks and bakeries, making the unfamiliar feel like home. We celebrated small milestones: Emily's first paycheck, Lily's first school project, my first night sleeping soundly in months. Each step forward was a victory, proof that we were building something lasting. There were setbacks, of course. Some days the weight of the past pressed in, and Emily would grow quiet, lost in thought. I learned to give her space, to trust that she would come to me when she was ready. I struggled too with letting go of control, with accepting that I couldn't protect them from every hurt. But we talked about it, honestly and without blame, and each conversation brought us closer. We learned to ask for help when we needed it, to lean on friends and community. Emily's support group became a lifeline, a place where she could share her fears and triumphs without judgment. I found comfort in reconnecting with old friends, in sharing our story and hearing theirs in return. We discovered that we were not alone, that others had walked similar paths and found their way through. The biggest lesson we learned was that healing is not about erasing the past, but about making peace with it. We forgave ourselves and each other for the mistakes we'd made,
for the things we couldn't change. We let go of shame and replaced it with compassion for ourselves and for those who would hurt us. We set boundaries, not as walls to keep each other out, but as guideposts to keep us safe and honest. As the seasons changed and the days grew longer, I found myself looking forward instead of back. I watched Emily and Lily grow stronger, more confident, more at ease in the world. I felt pride in the family we had become. Not perfect, but real, resilient, and full of hope. One evening, as we sat together on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker on, Emily turned to me and smiled. "We made it, Mom," she said softly. "We really did." I squeezed her hand, my heart full. Yes, we did. And whatever comes next, we'll face it together. In that moment, I knew that we had found our new beginning, not in the absence of struggle, but in the courage to keep moving forward together. Our story was not one of perfect endings, but of honest, hopeful new chapters. And as the night settled around us, I felt certain that at last we were home. Looking back, I see now that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. It can come from those we trust most, and its wounds run deep. But I've also learned that healing is possible, even after the darkest chapters. Our family's journey was never about finding perfection. It was about learning to forgive, to set boundaries, and to choose hope over fear. We are not the same people we were before, and that's a good thing. We are stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever. If you've ever faced betrayal or loss, know that you're not alone. Your story matters, and your voice deserves to be heard. I invite you to share your own experiences in the comments. Let's support each other, learn from each other, and remind ourselves that new beginnings are always possible. And if you thought this story was powerful, wait until you hear what happened when a letter from the past arrived at my doorstep, changing everything I thought I knew about forgiveness. Don't miss it.